dotnet-inspect with Richard Lander.
The Azure and DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using the latest in .NET, Azure, AI, and DevOps. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. The show is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm. Find them at www.clearmeasure.com. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. My returning guest today on the show is Richard Lander, and he was on the show in episode 289 when we were talking about containerization and Linux in 2024. And he is a principal program manager on the .NET team at Microsoft. He has topped over the 25-year mark. He's been with Microsoft since 2000, and he's been working on .NET since it came out. And currently, he's working on the .NET team with all kinds of things, runtime features, container experience. He does a lot of blogging and customer engagement, and he works with the overall .NET team on designing tools and features that keep that train rolling. So, Richard, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Awesome. Yeah, well, they gave me the gray hair award for 25 years, so I'm super proud of that.
Oh, you had no gray hair when you joined, huh?
Yeah,
Nice.
actually, it's funny. We had a going away party for one of our people recently, and when you have those, like, you sometimes see people that you haven't seen in quite some time. So I saw this guy who I think I hadn't seen in like 10 years. And we still knew each other's names and everything. And he's like, "Rich, what happened to your hair?"
Nice.
So it's all good.
Nice. Well, you have been at Microsoft the entire .NET journey from the time that it came out, and it was, thinking, oh, what this new language, this new runtime, and then how do we carry the current development community forward? But if I could kind of rewind the clock a little bit, you've been on such a large journey, and even before that, what is it about programming, about software that just grips you, that just makes it perpetually interesting, where you kind of stuck with it all this time?
Yeah. Well, so you touch on a couple things. One is, so I joined Microsoft in 2000 out of school. And then I started using C# in the early 1.0 previews. And I thought it was amazing. And it was kind of time to switch teams. So I applied and I got the role, obviously. By the time I got there, it was 2003. So it wasn't, technically the beginning. Like, some of the people had kind of already been like 5 years in. Like the first people kind of started in like 98 or 99. And I think, by 99, 2000 is kind of when the full team was there. So when I joined, almost all the original people were still there. Like, so for example, if you go way back, some listeners probably remember reading Suzanne Cook's assembly loader blog. That was one of the original ones. We were a PM dev pair. I only bring her up because her blog was well read and it was fantastic. But yeah, she was one of the original people. And then to your second question, and those people were all fantastic, super smart, and Then in terms, so I've thought about this many times actually. Like, why spend? If I've been there since 2003, then it means I've basically been on that team for 23 years. Give or take. And so, I've seen a lot of people, like, we've gone through trends. Like, at one point, there was a ton of people on the team leaving to go to Google. That was a pretty small group. And then a ton of people went to Meta over the years. And it's like, oh, maybe I should do that too. And I realized the thing I like about the runtime team and .NET in general is, like, every 5 years or so, we completely switch what our focus is. So when we started out, it was client server. And then Silverlight, and then we did phone and Windows Store, and then we did cloud. And, some of these periods were longer than others. And now we're doing AI. And so there's two aspects that I really liked about that one. One is I've continued to go deeper on my home base because it ends up being this, there's often this depth versus breadth tension with career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been able to do both. So obviously after 20 years, hopefully I've picked up some amount of depth. But then these changing industry and business priorities cause us to need to like learn something completely different. So like Silverlight, for example, was just like completely different to cloud. But then, and then AI is just different than everything. But the other aspect is so like the management team is often like super focused on like the deliverable, right? Like, how do we do the Silverlight thing and get it into browsers? How do we, do this whole Windows Store project? How do we make sure that .NET works really well in Docker containers in Azure? So that they're like super deliverable focused. And then like the architect crew that I'm on clearly care deeply about that. But we always have this like secret mission where we've got these, multi-year projects, often like sometimes 5-year long arcs that we want to go build.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, okay, so how do we then, in the Silverlight project do this? And then once we get to Windows Store, then we can kind of like keep on building. And so like, if you think about it, Silverlight is when Core CLR was born. So that's when we took framework and we stripped it down. We got rid of the features that we hated. So that's like when we got rid of CAS. That's when app domains went away. A bunch of other things. And then,
And for the young people who don't remember, that's the first time you had .NET code running inside of a browser, right?
Yeah. And then also it targeted Mac and Windows,
right,
and then there was a community port for Linux. And let me just finish the story arc and I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
The major arc I'm trying to tell is literally there's this straight line between Silverlight and native AOT, which literally no one thinks of it that way. But we made that investment with Silverlight. There was like this. Jason Zander was our POM at that time, product unit manager, who went on to glory in the Azure organization. And he formed, kind of like a strike team. There were like 6 or 12 people out of a much larger org that did that. But then we've continued to like figure out how to adapt. I don't want to use the word innovate. I kind of hate that term, but like adapt that code base to like completely different form factor. And so if you start from the big .NET framework, Silverlight, and then you get native AOT, which I use every day now. And the tool that we're going to talk about later is built with it. And it's because these people have figured out how to thread the needle across these like, client server, browser, phone, Windows Store, cloud, now AI, how to take those low-level investments and make them basically be able to interleave them with these business priorities over multiple years. And then you get great things. And now when we're arriving at the AI wave, we'll talk more about this. So, we have this .NET Tools capability. The thing we delivered in .NET 10 was what we call RID-specific tools, horrible name, although it's the name we have, which means, you can basically have a tools package that has one payload that will run on all operating systems. That's kind of like the Core CLR payload. And it's, framework-dependent app. And then the rest are all native AOT, and they're optimized for specific OS architecture. So that's the end state we arrived at. And it like ends up that console apps, the terminal has won, like, and so because we like stayed true to these fundamentals, we're arriving at a great place. So that's really the answer to your question is like, thinking about multi-year horizons, realizing that fundamentals win in the end, while you still have to do the scenarios to pay the bills. That's how we think on my team.
Okay. Nice.
Hopefully that makes sense to you.
It does. So you've been on the team for a long time, but it's new and fresh, and you're making progress, and you're accomplishing big things, and it's fun every day. Nice. So you're working on some new tooling that's called .NET-Inspect. Can you tell us?
Well, let's back up one tiny more bit. I think there's a part that is needed, and I think will resonate with a lot of people. So, I think we've had two major shifts in like the last 6 years. The first one was COVID.
That was a shift.
Yeah, that was a shift. And I think it like completely changed how people think about work. You know, lots of companies in terms of Microsoft are kind of doing this RTO thing, but return to office.
Return to office, yeah.
Yeah, but fundamentally the workplace is like completely different to how it was before. And I think I'd say it's almost entirely for the better. I think, yeah, we'll just leave it. This isn't supposed to be a talk about that.
Sure.
And then the next shift is the AI one. And so like last year, that's really when, at least for me, other people are probably in a different spot. But that's when, kind of like this time last year, is when like the tsunami hit. That was like this realization that we're at this new point. Like it was like this, a bomb went off and everything is going to be different. And I kind of like realized to myself as like a professional working in this industry, and this may sound a bit dire, but I'm being transparent about how I feel. I felt it's like my skills the value of them had dropped by like 50+% because of that. And what that means is like,
but do you believe that, or were you worried that might be true?
No, this isn't about worry. No, this is about my actual feeling of the situation on the ground. Now,
got it.
So the actual, it's basically this also isn't supposed to be a talk about is AI taking jobs. That's not where I'm headed with this.
Sure.
It's just the idea that the way work is going to be done is completely different, and so the skills that you need to kind of like you and I and many others have spent decades knowing how to control the machine.
Yep.
In order to get a certain result. And so this AI change completely changes the way you control the machine. And it also completely changes the way we define what a product is. So that's when I say, I mean, in my mind, I'm always a bit dire, because if you go super dire, it helps to motivate yourself. At least for me, this is how I operate.
Okay.
Let's think of like the worst possible way of thinking about this. And then that motivates change. So I was like, okay, my skills have atrophied 90% in like one day when I finally realized this like a year ago. And so it's like, okay, I need to like build up a whole bunch of skills and then think about what products mean going forward. The second thing, and this is really only a 2-part thing, it's not like a 6th thing, is I also realized these models are going to improve at a dramatic rate. If your big idea is something that is directly beside, like you can kind of think of these as like layer cakes or something like that. If the thing you're working on is right beside a model, it's going to get consumed next week, next month, next year. So that doesn't seem very durable. So, I mean, if you're in the lab, OpenAI or Anthropic, and you're doing that, then that makes way more sense. But if you're doing something as like, independent software company or whatever, that's going to get completely gobbled up. And it's different than the Sherlock syndrome with Apple. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
No, I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, Sherlock is, it means Apple is like, so the reason it's called that is because there was an app or something called Sherlock, which was the first one to have this happen to them. So that scenario is you have like a calendar app. It's super popular. Everyone loves it and thinks it's amazing. Apple notices this, and then they just re-implement your features in their app, and your app's dead.
Yeah.
This isn't like that. This is like the models just get so capable that the thing that you're building is like a trick.
Yeah.
And so the model doesn't need the trick anymore. And so your whole thing just disintegrates. So basically the second point is I think the need for products, if you want them to be durable and stay in the market, they obviously have to be, it's useful if they're LLM adjacent, like if they integrate in some way. But if you want durability, then they have to be something that the model isn't just going to be able to do in the next 2 or 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So then we're getting closer to the tool. So then I was like, okay, I think where we're going to end up is we basically have 3 layers that are the fundamental ones. And then here I'm just talking about the people writing code with LLMs. If you're using LLMs to drive a 747, I don't know anything about that. So I think there's going to be 3 things. Clearly, the model is at the bottom. Yeah, that's the heart of it. And then the next layer up is basically the agent. It's the agent. Yeah, it's really just the agent. So you've got Copilot, Cloud Code, Gemini, CLI, whatever. And I'm completely on the CLI train.
Yeah. The AI coding tools.
Yeah. And then the next one is the Dev SDK. Rust, Cargo and Rust C, or Swift and Swift C, or .NET SDK, and tools that support that. And then, and then and LSPs fit in that boat too. Language service providers. Yeah, I think that's what that stands for. And things like that. So those are my 3 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think and this is a bit controversial, but I don't really think editors are part of that. They're additional, but they're not part of the core thing. So, because in the old world, when I said controlling the machine, the editor is where you are all the time. Well, that's just not the case anymore. What I kind of imagine, I'm not going to go there. So,
well, you have to. You have to have some kind of vision. You have to think, when the web came about 25 years ago, the way we used computers differed. When the smartphone came about, the way we had a computer in our pocket. When the smart watch came about, it's now we have a different user interface paradigm for talking to our watch. It's now AI is out. What is the user interface now, and what might it be 2 years from now, 4 years from now?
Yeah, and I've got a bunch of thoughts on that, but that's that's not really what I want to talk about today. So basically, what I realized is, we haven't invested as much as we should have in the .NET CLI, and so I think that's at least for my team, that's our number one leverage point. And I've got a bunch of ideas on how to do that. And I think that's super durable. There was a post that came out just in the last week. I can't remember which lab did this. I think it was Anthropic, but it could have been a different one. So they got they had the agent run for 24 hours or something like that, and then it created a GCC clone.
Yeah,
but not from reading GCC sources. So GCC is the GNU C compiler, and
$20,000 of tokens later, and they were
probably more than 3,000 to be honest. But I just think that's not. It it doesn't really change dev tools. Like the fact that you could go like start a coding session and it could like build the compiler for you. Like, why would that be useful? Like, because the whole thing about compilers is they have high fidelity to the source that is in literally millions of GitHub repos and obviously tons on-prem and all that kind of stuff. So what you want is something that's stable, that is on a trajectory. So I just don't think that's part of that. That's going to get gobbled up because it kind of doesn't make sense. So anyway, so I have a bunch of plans for the .NET CLI, but I wanted to build a prototype. I didn't want to work on the .NET CLI because it's big and complicated. I wanted to work on something that would be super fun to work on, and that I could just push to NuGet.org as a global tool. And but that would prove out the ideas that we could reuse in the CLI. So that's where this dotnet-inspect tool came from. The other part is you mentioned that I've been in container land, and so I've been super exposed to container tooling. And so my two favorite commands from container land are docker inspect and kubectl describe. I just think that those are fantastic commands. And the thing that is super clear to me is that the people working on those tools built those experiences because they were necessary. Yeah, so I spent all this time using these tools, and it was very obvious that the people built them because they're necessary. And like when I was using those tools, like I immediately connect with those experiences and understand what they're for. And I guess I feel like I'm connecting with the people who built them because I can like think of what their mentality was like building them. And we don't have any experiences in the CLI that are like that. Like I use the CLI every day for many hours a day, and I don't connect with the CLI in that same way. So that's what I want to fix.
Yeah.
The other part that I really liked about both Docker Inspect and kubectl describe is they have a JSON first. That's what they expose. And so I like JSON as much as the next guy, but it's actually not about JSON. It's about the fact that that data is naturally queryable. Like if you look at a command like .NET-info, .NET-info, which by the way, I'm the PM for it.
Nice.
I think it's like the worst experience. It's super bad. Part of this is looking at it again through new eyes, or that's what most of it is. It's super useful data, but it is not built with a query-first mindset.
Yeah.
So, I mean, LLMs can read what's in .NET-info fine, but the thing you need to do building these tools is you need to like have an overall paradigm, and then you apply it across the whole thing. Which, if you look at the CLI, that was not done. If you look at, I think Docker and kubectl are way better on that front. So, .NET-inspect is this tool I started building, and it is intended to be an even better version than kubectl describe and Docker inspect, but for .NET. And back to the JSON thing, my take is that for the 90+% case, Markdown is the best output. And I describe Markdown, particularly if it has tables in it, as web native CSV.
Because it is structured. Yep, it's parsable.
Markdown tables are just as terse as CSV. But yeah, I mean, if you have a 1,000,000-line Markdown table, I mean, compared to a 1,000,000-line CSV, the number of bytes different is going to be very little. I mean, if I was doing that, I'd remove the pipes on both sides. Normally, you put pipes on both sides, but
Yeah, it's optional.
It's optional. Now we're getting into the weeds. But and obviously, like all the prompts, like skill.md, all that stuff, it's all Markdown. So it's not like LLMs don't know how to read that. And then Markdown is actually, if it's well done, is actually easier to read than like .NET-Info. .NET-Info is like this very ad hoc structure. So now I was first thinking of this, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to like design the output of this tool, blah, blah, blah. Then I realized that's completely the wrong way of thinking about this. What you need is a Markdown serializer. Design that well, give it some good serializer features, and then just run objects through it. And then they will just get serialized into they'll just get presented at Markdown in Markdown based on the structure of the object graph. And so that was the other take, is like, okay, let's do Markdown. And because if you think about JSON, every object repeats. So yeah, back to the million line thing. Imagine you have a million lines and it's tabular, right? So you've got, let's just say, make it super easily. It's a products thing. So you've got like name, like units available, price, and description. CSV and Markdown are going to be almost identical. So they're going to have those column names at the very top. And that's the only time that they'll be presented for these million lines. And then the million lines is literally just the data. So that's hyper efficient. Like literally, you can't get more efficient than that. JSON, on the other hand.
If we get back up just a bit, because there's a lot of listeners who use containers all the time. They throw it at average Kubernetes service or Azure container apps, but they might not have ever used Docker, the Docker commands or the kubectl. So exactly why did they care? What is it? What is the usefulness of those that translates?
Yeah. So Docker inspect, what it allows you to do is, and this is the main way I use it, is you say Docker inspect and then you give it a SHA. What do I mean by SHA? You give it the digest of the container image. Actually, I think you can give it the image name as well. So you could say, I think you can literally type, Docker inspect, and then you could write like, mcr.microsoft.com/.net/SDK:10. And then what it tells you is what's inside that. I mean, it doesn't list files. Inside? So it's describing what that tag says. So it'll tell you what the modified date was. And when you do that, it's not actually looking at that name in the registry. It's looking at that name in your local cache. So say, for example, you haven't pulled that thing for like 10 months. Last modified date is going to be 10 months ago.
Gotcha. It's probably been patched by then.
It's definitely been patched many times since then. And so what happens is a customer will come to us and says, oh, they're always fairly aggressive. So I'm going to play this up. It's like, you guys don't run a first-class shop. Your images have like 17 CVEs in them, security vulnerabilities. What are you doing? I'm often responding to these emails. It's like, okay, tell us, give me the SHA for, or, run this Docker inspect command, and tell me what the modified date is on your images. And it's like 10 months ago. It's like, okay, so maybe Docker pull is in your future. So like these container images, they're just binary blobs, right? So you need a tool to go inside them. Like most people aren't used to this. So I'm more like, say you have a bunch of images on your computer, PNGs and JPEGs. No one thinks about having a describe command on those, right? Because just double click on that and then the image pops up and you see it's like, a beach picture from your vacation last summer.
And then you can also all the other stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to say next, which is then you can right click and you can see the XF, or whatever it's called, information, but it's because it's all presented to you. So it's a UI app.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what Docker Inspect is. And it's the viewer. And so what I do is I'll do Docker Inspect. It gives you JSON back. And then I do JQ queries on the JSON to get the data that I want. Because it's pretty voluminous, what's in there, because it tells you about all the layers that it's based on. It's a power user tool. Kubectl they'll describe is very similar. But for power users, it's absolutely amazing. And you can get a lot of insight from that and turn that into confident action.
So now for .NET Inspect.
So I wanted to say one more thing about JSON, because this is so when I first started this journey last year, I was like, oh, okay, well, JSON's clearly what we want to give all the LLMs. So that's where I started. And I realized, back to this 1,000,000-line example, I said, for Markdown and CSV, you just have one line at the top that says the property names, and then the rest of the 1,000,000 lines is the data. So it's hyper efficient. With JSON, every object of those 1,000,000 objects, so you have an array, and then in the array is 1,000,000 objects. Each one of them repeats the property names. So
That's right.
if, one of them's called price, you will have the string price 1,000,000 times in that JSON document.
Yeah.
So that's crappy. And so that's why I think JSON absolutely makes no sense as the starting point.
Yeah. That was the XML problem.
Yeah. It's the same thing. So there's only one place where JSON could potentially win, but probably not. And just to be clear, this is the one part we're going to discuss where I definitely don't quite know what I'm talking about. So I want to caveat that.
Experimenting.
Yeah. So there's this thing called attention. And this is the way I understand it is, so you're having a chat conversation with LLM and it's multi-turn. Okay. Although that part doesn't matter for us what to say. So all this text gets tokenized and it gets pushed up to the LLM. And then, so tokenized, so it's, N tokens. And attention means that every token basically visits every other token. They attend to each other. And then they kind of like try and derive meaning from looking at all the other N tokens. So the property name, so if you have this 1,000,000 thing, your column name is very far away from you.
Okay. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So what you have to do is you have to realize you had a line break. Like this basically is just one contiguous set of bytes. At like line 500,000, you have a line break. And then you've got, some product name, and then a pipe, and then 2 integer, or one integer and 1 float, inventory and price, and then a description, and you have pipes between them. And so then the attention system has to somehow go all the way back up to the top to understand what the meaning of these 2 numbers are. So in JSON, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because
proximity.
The meaning of the term is right beside it. So there might be some scenarios where JSON is better because the meaning is super close. So the attention type mechanism will just naturally find it. I haven't found such a scenario because I think if you're uploading so much data to the model, you're probably doing the wrong thing. But I just wanted to bring up that case that there's this difference. So let's get to the tool. Hopefully all of this, I'm trying to bring you on the journey that I've been on.
Yeah.
So anyway, I built this tool. What it does is it can, let's talk about the resources it can inspect. It can inspect NuGet packages. It can inspect platform assemblies, platform libraries. And then it can inspect raw libraries or raw NuGet packages on your disk.
Meaning DLLs.
Yeah. And what can it do with them? It can produce API lists. So it can say, like, you can say, what are the members? Like, what are the members in JSON serializer in system text JSON?
Mm-hmm.
You can say, only show me the ones that, start with D. It can say, show me all the dependencies of this package. You can say, show me all the classes that have extension methods for this type so that I can find them. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So
one more thing that I've learned over the last year is, for much of my career, I have let my intuition guide me a lot. In this new world, I'm relying much less on my intuition. I am relying much more on observation. So, built this tool, and it has all these capabilities. And the other thing it can do is it can diff two package versions and detect breaking changes.
Ooh, that's neat.
Yeah, I built a skill.md. I mean, this is like super, you just tell the LLM, write a skill for me.
Yeah.
And then I just started started just doing normal things. And the skill would like kick in a lot. And this is the experience my colleagues have had because they have the skill installed too. The thing, and I have the same experience in Copilot, CLI, and Cloud Code. I use both of them. The thing just hammers the tool. It'll just like do 12 commands in a row to derive insight. And it like learns the tool super quick. So it's like, how you using like Visual Studio, how you basically became addicted to IntelliSense? It's like, how would I do development without IntelliSense? Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
That's what it's doing. It's doing IntelliSense. It's just like cracking the package. I mean, the tool does this for it. It's getting API lists. Like, it can get down to like, show me I want to see all the, JSON serializer.deserialize signatures. And then if it says like, it exposes this interface, and it's like, okay, well, show me what's on this interface. So it's like having all of MSDN available to you.
Okay, so help me if I'm on the right track. You got this new command line interface. I could use a command line, but really, if I'm using Claude or Copilot and I'm using, no matter how many NuGet packages I've pulled in, now it's able to, instead of searching the web for its documentation, it can go directly against the DLL and know everything that's callable and all the permutations for it so that it can do a better job modifying or generating code.
Yeah. Yeah. And the tool even exposes the source code to it.
Okay.
So if you think about it,
nice.
Obviously, I'm very .NET biased, but I was like, as I was building this tool, I was like realizing, oh, wow, .NET's like the best positioned platform for this kind of thing because of metadata.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing we push up to the package registry is metadata. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, the other thing it does, so I don't know if you know much about SourceLink.
No.
Have you heard of this term before?
I've heard of it, but I don't know that I've ever used it.
Yeah, so it's amazing. What SourceLink does, it's very, very simple, but it's very, very awesome. And you should do this certainly if you have any public projects, you should do it for all of them. What it does, and it's just it's not like a whole thing you have to install. It's basically you just have to opt into this. When you compile your code, it puts a little JSON document in the PDB.
Okay.
What this JSON document does, it says, this library was built from this commit, and this is the remote. And then it allows you to acquire all like this makes the most sense for open source projects on GitHub or GitLab.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to get all the source files at that commit for the entire library. But then it's like, there are / comments in source files. I wonder if when we're presenting, when this tool is presenting the overloads for the deserialize method, what if we could get the documentation from the source code through SourceLink and present that at the same time?
Yeah, I just realized I use SourceLink all the time, but not directly because it's just embedded into the debugger and the IDE, and it just happens.
Yeah, those are the best kind of features. So, and then I realized some projects, although very few, I actually realized Newtonsoft does this. As part of the / comments, you can link to a sample. So this tool can follow all of that. It can say, like, for this type, here are the samples that are available. And then it gives, and this is super key, it gives raw .github URLs for everything. So like when you're in a AI session and you say, like, go grab that URL, like you're on GitHub and you're on a page that's showing source code. You're like, oh, I'll just give you that and it can read the source code. Well, it's reading HTML. It's not reading a .cs file.
Right.
So that has to go through a different model to un-HTML it, to turn it into something reasonable. It's the same as doing a view source on GitHub. It's super shitty. So SourceLink is all raw URLs. I mean, you can see this. If you go on GitHub, press the raw button, and then you'll see what it looks like. That's what I'm giving the models. So it's super efficient. Anyway, so when the skill kicks in, it's doing all of this, and then it goes so much faster.
So I can see this with any NuGet package that we're using and generating code, but so many service providers and third-party services you might subscribe to, they provided web services you can integrate with, but a lot of them provide a .NET client package that's a DLL you pull down from NuGet, and then you just reference it, and it controls jumping across the network to its system. It's just a .NET library from my perspective.
Yeah, client library.
So sounds like this would it's just a library. So sounds like this impacts like third-party integration story because of that. Am I right?
So this is what this is a perfect point for. So you're on a computer right now, right?
I am.
And does it have .NET 10 installed?
It does.
Okay, so open up. So I want you to be the guinea pig. I'm not going to do the demo. You can do this, and then we can rely on your reaction.
Got it. Terminal window open. Non-administrator.
Yeah, you don't need to be an administrator for this.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So do you know the DNX command? We added it in .NET 10.
Just from reading about it, not deeply.
Okay, so it's fine. So this is the same thing as like Node has this command called npx. This is the same thing. What it does is it's a download and launcher. It will download a global tool and launch it for you.
All right, got it. .NET DNX.
Yeah, so type this on your command prompt. DNX space.
Okay.
.NET-inspect. And tell me what happens. Yeah, that's it. Let's just to get started.
Tool package download confirm, type Y for confirm to proceed. And it says description .NET-inspect, a CLI tool for inspecting .NET libraries and NuGet packages. Looks good.
Okay, so now type, I just added this morning. Type that same thing again. You have to type it every time because it's the launcher. Yeah.
.NET.
And then after, you're going to type a command after that, which is demo. So these are a bunch of canned demos.
Okay, demo enter.
And then you just get help for that. So type
demo 7, demo 12, demo 13.
Yeah. So now start running some of the demos. Some of them are or did you see the list first?
I'll do demo. There was a few tips. It gave a few samples. So demo 12.
No. So before running the demo, do demo list. 13 of them, I think.
14. 14. Okay.
Some of them are client libraries. So you pick anyone, or we can go through all of them.
All right. I'll do number 12, which is the Microsoft Extensions AI OpenAI. So demo.
Explain what it says it does, because doesn't it give a description of what the query is?
Yeah, it says it's going to run a curated demo queries that showcase the tool.
Okay. I think I need to work on my description a little bit.
All right. So demo 12, enter. It's looking at Microsoft Extensions AI.OpenAI, and it gives a visual tree of all the namespaces and types, or all the namespaces.
Here, let me run this on my machine too,
packages.
so I can see what you're actually seeing.
So Microsoft Extensions AI references AI.abstractions, OpenAI, system.client model, system.collections. It's the whole dependency tree of Microsoft Extensions AI.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's because where would I get that from? I'd have to use the visual. Well, for me, use the visual visualizer, or use ReSharper tools that open them up. I mean, some ReSharper visually, but then how does the AI tool get that in its context?
Right. So for people that are listening, just to ground this, so if the thing you were wanting to understand is like, you look at someone's CS proj and you see this package reference to some library. It's like, oh, that library looks fine, but you don't understand what their complete transitive dependencies are, and you want to understand your supply chain better. Run this command, and you literally now understand your supply chain completely because you see all the references.
Okay, so every integration build on every build server in the automated release notes should include this build depends on, and then, well, now your automatic security scanners have, I mean, that's one scenario where here's all the stuff, and if any of these libraries put out a security bulletin, I need to pay attention.
Yeah. So now, so run a different demo now. Pick a different one.
All right. I just picked number 1, which is the I number of type T. That was more constrained. System.numerics. It depends on, it's T self. It's the I number interface. I number.
Yeah. So the reason T. I picked this one is, so this one, so it implements a ton of interfaces. And then the T is itself constrained. So this has a generic constraint, which is the T has to be a I number of T.
So it's itself.
That's what it's telling you. And then, So anyway, I thought this was a good example of the tool.
And there's looks like there's exactly one type, and so
you're asking for only that type. This is an exact match.
That's right. Exactly. And it has it has the methods. It has all
this is printing. This is printing the shape. That's why it's called, if you saw the command is -- shape, it's printing the shape so you can see it. Okay, do a different one. Okay,
I'll do demo number 2, which that's a big one, which is .NET-inspect API int 128 -- shape.
Yeah, so this is not an interface this time. This is a concrete type. And this one does like operator overloading, I think. I remember.
Yeah, there's constructors, properties, methods.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's operators. There's explicit operators and equality operators. There's a checked explicit operator. Yep. That's super useful to have in a text tool. Okay, I have to ask you now. There, so much of the oxygen in the AI conversation with integration has been about AI tools and MCP servers. But here you're presenting not registering something as an AI tool, but just providing a command line. So what's your thinking on that front?
Yeah, so I think if the functionality is useful for humans, which I think you're concluding that this is useful for humans, then should be a tool first. Do an MCP tool too if you want. But like LLMs are like super good at calling tools. They have no difficulty whatsoever with that. So I would always build a tool first and then convince myself that an MCP was needed. Like, if you build an MCP only, and there was no reason for that, and then you lock humans out of using that same functionality, then you kind of failed.
That's just like a REST web service.
Yeah, exactly.
People don't
It's
like using those things raw.
Yeah. It's like you're forcing. And imagine, you didn't have a website and it was only REST. And it's like, okay, if you know how to use curl, then you'll have no problem whatsoever getting the data. It's like,
or you have a Postman application. Okay.
Yeah.
So this, along with just being useful in the .NET runtime, I think this has huge implications to the integration story, because like I mentioned, everybody's been thinking, oh, I need to create an MCP server so that AI tools can get into my existing data, existing systems that might already have web services. But with this, it seems like if I wrote just a .NET library that knew how to take my existing web services or functions and expose my existing system, and this format of command line tool, I basically get the AI tool for free almost.
Yeah.
And then MCP is optional.
Yeah, that's my take.
That's a big idea. That's a big idea. That's a big idea.
I don't know if it's that big, but that was the conclusion I came to. I'm glad you came to that. I think so.
Yeah.
I think like we've been on this, like when I started using computers, there was no Windows, right? It was just one big command prompt. And I've always loved the command prompt best. And so I feel like that's definitely what we're going back to.
Nice. I've always thought that a good user interface shouldn't require the mouse, because the old COBOL green screens, people would fly around those applications with all the hotkeys and the tab, and every time you reach for a mouse and try to line up a pointer on something, it's just it's a slow mechanic motion.
Yeah. So try demo 9. I want you to do demo 9 and then demo 6.
Okay. Demo 9 and Anthropics. Let me go up to the top. So I did demo 9, and the top level of this is .NET-inspect find the term chat *, converse *, message * in the package OpenAI.
Yeah, it's not a term.
Or
it's
all the
type
multiple
names.
packages. Type names in. Looks like we're listing 3 packages or 4 packages.
Yeah, and say them on the air so that people know what the packages were.
Package OpenAI, package Azure.ai.openai, or package AWS SDK Bedrock Runtime, or package Anthropic.
Okay, and then what do we see?
For chat *, so for chat we get 44 matches, and it is 44 matches across that listing of packages mixed in, and then we get 23 matches for converse. We get 53 matches for types that start with message, and then we get a few tips on how to use the command line better.
Right. So what this is trying to show is this is like a very exploratory type of scenario. So say you were writing a type of app. This one is obviously an AI app, and we're searching on the concept, chat and message, could be conversation, across all an SDK that we know we're going to be using. And it's like, okay, so because sometimes you add a package that you've never used before, and you need to kind of explore it to kind of figure out where the top level kind of types are, where you start, and then obviously you kind of over time figure out which lower level types that you need to interact with. And so this is basically allowing you to search multiple packages at once to kind of get a sense of where those starting point roots are with those type names, with the globbing.
Yeah, it seems like
So number
every...
six is the breaking change one.
Okay, so demo number 6, and this is a lot of output. Let me go back to
Yeah, well, it's probably not good that it's a lot of output.
Okay, number 6 was .NET-inspect diff system.command line version 2 beta 4 to looks like version 2.0.3 dash V. So verbosity quiet. That's the quiet verbosity. Okay. Yeah, so it's doing an API diff on the system.command line, and
it tells you all the
has,
breaking changes.
breaking.
So if you're migrating from version N, like version X to version Y, then this will give you a sense. Like this is perfect for if you have an LLM that is going to, a coding agent that's going to upgrade your app from .NET 9 to .NET 10 or system command line beta 4 to 2.03.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is basically telling you up front where the landmines are. Or in the case of like .NET 9 to .NET 10, where there's definitely less breaking changes, they're more additive, then it would kind of be giving you a sense of where the opportunities might be. Like, oh, what new API should I consider using?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this one is more about migration and upgrade.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool.
And what you're seeing
Man.
there is the markdown output. Like you probably didn't even realize that. Oh, I'm reading markdown in the terminal.
Yeah, because
So
we have bullet lists and we have headers. Yeah,
and
everything's
trees.
a header. Pound, which is a header.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I built this other project called Markout, which is a source generated only markdown serializer, and that's what this tool uses, and that's what I want to use in the CLI, .NET CLI. So
because any visualizer can take this and just run it through.
Totally.
The transformer and show bold and font. Face. Font sizes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's it. Yeah,
this is a lot. I think this right here, what you're embarking on, this strategy is for anything in the .NET runtime to be command lineable, composable, the old Unix strategy of let's make all the output from one command line pipeable as input into another command line. So building those building blocks, enabling that as a runtime, and then us as developers who are using .NET, we can not only use it for the Microsoft libraries and all that, but for our own to be a easy gateway from AI tools into whatever entry point is relevant for us.
Yeah. Like with the, so imagine .NET Build worked the same way.
Mm.
Then you'd get markdown output and say, it's like, oh, I can't figure this out. Then what you do, until you're working on a project with people, just take that output, copy it into a GitHub issue. It will format as markdown. Like it'll render, it'll look nice.
Right.
Or if you just put it into a file, because those are sections, you'll actually be able to deep link into one of the sections because those always get anchor points.
Yes, that's true. Because right now, if you type in something .NET Build or wherever, and you get an error, you get a non-zero error code, but then you just get a string. But even if something's wrong, there's the error code. Maybe I want a full description, or maybe I want just the section where you had a compile error and you want to have a command line to funnel that somewhere.
Yes.
Nice. This is big. I'm excited. This is big.
I'm glad you like it.
I wish we could keep talking for a long time about this. Maybe have to come back on the show and when it's not just a Richard Lander project and and really dig in, because I think that there's the pattern here that just almost every .NET team can benefit from, not just using this tool, but integrating it into DevOps environments and deployments and monitoring and wow, this is cool.
Awesome.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here, I'll include the links in the show notes and the Git repositories and all that stuff. Are there any additional things that we should turn the listeners on here before we close up?
So the one thing that's it's a thing. So the way you install this is, and this is something that's like kind of new, is with a skill plugin. So I have another repo called richlander/.net-skills. And so what you do is you type /plugin add, and then you type richlander/.net-skills. And so the reason I'm telling you this, and also the reason why I'm stumbling a little bit, is because this is like a completely new way of delivering software. So what you do is you don't actually, like if you're doing this in a coding agent, you don't actually like run DNX.
Mhm.
Like you don't bring this to your machine to make it so that the LM can use it. You install the plugin, which brings the skill, which is just a markdown file, skill.md. That's what comes down to your machine. The skill includes the DNX commands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a bit of a mind shift. So every time I update this tool, like I've been adding, new commands, like I added the demo command this morning. I also like removed a bunch of commands yesterday that I realized were stupid. Then what I have to do is I have to update the skill.md to match. And then there's like a plugin JSON file that has a version so that my users realize that there's been an update because that version number changed. So what I do is that I'm doing all of this with an agent. And then I get it to update the skill.md, update the version number, push all that in one action, and push to NuGet.org. So that's the whole other aspect. So if people want to use this in an agent, then use the other repo, the .NET Skills one, and do a plugin add. And I'm updating that all the time, and the intent is to give you a good experience. But that's actually the gesture.
Nice. Wow, this is cool. Well, it hadn't been since 2024, which apparently is way too long. So we'll have to get you back on the show.
Yeah,
too long.
I'm sure I'll have something more to say.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and showing this to us. I think everybody listening is going to be jumping onto these GitHub repositories and playing around with it. So thanks so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure and DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at www.clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.